guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader, and today I am gonna do a video that's something I've never done before, but I thought it's September, it's like fall is coming, and I saw a bunch of these videos going around and I really enjoyed the recommendations that I found, and I think that I definitely feel this year the autumn vibe, the fall vibes, and I decided to sit down last night and basically close my eyes and think about what books, if you think about fall season, what books come to mind. And I actually had a surprisingly quite long list of them, and I decided, then let's make a video of recommendations. And all the books I'm gonna mention are books that might not be my top favorite ever, but they're all books I really enjoyed. If this works, I'm definitely gonna do one for winter, and I think it's very cool. And I didn't go for my shelves and just say, oh, you this or that. I just literally closed my eyes and thought fall and tried to associate books with it. So probably gonna do one for winter. Winter gives me more dark, intense vibes, while fall definitely gave me more thrillerish vibes. Or gothic vibes. There are different genres in here that I came up with, basically. Some genres more than others, because again, the thrillerish vibe was definitely there. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Funny story, like England skipped summer this year. Like it was like, no, summer, overrated. And then we complained a lot because we had not seen the sun basically in 3 months. And so today, which is already the 7th of September when I'm filming these, England has said apparently, oh, you're complaining, I'm gonna give you a couple of very hot and warm and sunny days just to make you shut up. So this is why I look like it's still summer, and I got a summer vibe going on, but no, trust me, this is not gonna last. It has been fall in England since June, basically. Let me start with actually an honorable mention, that it's the only book that I was actually sitting down to film and I noticed behind me, and it's a book that I definitely enjoyed. I gave it solid 4 stars. I didn't particularly like the ending, but overall I definitely recommend, and it's historical fiction with literature fiction elements in it, and this is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. If this cover doesn't shout fall to you, I don't know what will. Stunning book. And this is the story of 2 girls born in the Gold Coast of Africa, and I think at the end of 19th century, and they are stepsisters, but they never meet because their life take very different turns, and you follow the generation of the 2 sisters, their children and children of the children and so forth, to modern days basically, and how the beginning, so the 2 sisters at the beginning, how the life they had shaped them, the generation in the future, and their lives as well. And so I wanted to mention this because it's a fairly quick read, especially because of the format it has. Each chapter is a generation. Definitely innovating. It's famous. You've heard about this a million times. So yeah, honorable mention goes to Homegoing. And let me start covering, the classics, the 2 classics that actually popped in my mind immediately. I've spoke about them a million times, so I'm not gonna go in any details about them. But one, of course, is my favorite classic so far, which is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I got the illustrated edition. Don't know who I cannot show these. Loved these so much. I love the story. It's my favorite classic. It's Dracula, and definitely fall to me, and October and Halloween. It screams vampires, and I love vampires. So another classic that I absolutely loved was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I love this cover as well. Like this collection by Penguin was amazing, but I also loved the illustrated edition by Grace Grimley. And I mean, this is Frankenstein, right? You don't need me to tell you about the classics. But if you've not read either Frankenstein or Dracula for whatever reason ever, I think there is truly not best season to do so if not fall. I'll start with those that actually I do not own a physical copy, or if I do have a copy, it's in Italian, therefore probably still in Italy. Stuart McBride series is a crime writer. If you want some very brutal, with some very interesting cases, detective stories, Stuart McBride is the guy to go to. And I've read these ages ago, so I don't remember the case in the first one, but I enjoyed enough to continue on. And the more you continue, the more actually brutal and intense it gets. I think the 3rd or 4th book I was honestly shocked by the brutality of it. So it's a very intense adult detective mystery series. Be prepared because it's very violent and graphic. And another one that I also mentioned to My Life in Books, where I go through my life mentioning the books that had a particular impact on me. I spoke about The Bone Collector, which is part of the Lincoln Rhyme series. This is another amazing detective crime series that I absolutely loved, and I am definitely recommending this to you if you like the genre. The protagonist, who is actually bedridden after an accident, I believe, his mind, the way it works, and the cases that are brought forward are just like, it was one of those books where I kept reading because I needed to know who was the bad guy. And it's a series packed of action, but also a lot of thoughts and the investigative process and the mind of this man and how he works to solve the crime, such a complex crime that was absolutely fascinating. And on the same vibes, although it's definitely less focused on a detective but more on the protagonist, it's the Millennium series. I have never read past the original trilogy. I know that the author, before passing away, wrote just the first 3 books, so I never actually went past, and I heard not very good things about the other books. But to be fair, I read the trilogy and it was kind of completed, so I didn't feel like I was missing out. These are amazing thrillers. These are, like, I remember I couldn't put these beasts down. I read all of them back to back basically, and it's such a complex, interesting story. Probably you've heard about this a million times, so you already know what it's about, but I also think that it develops in a way that you don't see coming. So it's one of those where if you go in kind of not knowing what you to expect, is best. And also it's definitely fall vibes, if it makes sense. Like, it's definitely a good book to curl on your sofa with a blanket and a cup of hot chocolate and just be immersed and be devastated at the same time. And if you've read by any chance the rest of the series, please let me know, because I value your opinion if you think I should continue on with the rest, or I done well just stopping at, the original trilogy. Let's instead move past the detective recommendations for like a kind of a weird recommendation, but again, that's the book I thought of when I was thinking about making this video. And the book is A Kiss of Shadow by Laura K. Hamilton. This is another series. Laura K. Hamilton, she wrote the Anita Blake Vampire series, which I loved the first 8 books, and it's a staple series for me. Again, the first books in the series from my childhood, and I've all read other books by her. And the Mary Gentry series, which this book is the first installment in, it's definitely an adult book with a lot of sexual content in it, so it's definitely fantasy erotica, and it's about the fae. So you've got this princess of a fae that has lived among humans to escape, as this Anseli and Sellie court are very much at war, and they kill each other, and there is a lot of political intrigue into this. And I don't want to spoil anything, but let's say that you need to go into these if you like fantasy, erotic fantasy, definitely. And if you don't mind explicit sex scenes, there is a lot of sexual content, as I said, a lot. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's if you know Laura K. Hamilton, you know what this is going. It's not there is a couple and they fall in love and everybody's happy. It's very different, but I enjoy what she does. So far, I've enjoyed the installments. I think the series is completed. I've read the last one a few years ago, so it's not too long. I think around 6 to 5 books, and I really enjoyed it. I like this style. I mean, I don't read romance anymore, but the way this was mixed with a lot of fantasy and fae elements, then I did really enjoy. I think a lot of books I've read past these try to emulate these, but also keeping a YA format where, got one main love interest and all of that. And I guess Laura K. Hamilton doesn't shy away from actually do what she wants and go against common conception about what couple should be, or like, it's just, I think she just says, I don't give a fuck, I write what I want, and that's my story for you. Enjoy it or leave it. And I enjoy it. Also, speaking about vampires, I am definitely recommending the Sookie Steakhouse series. The first book is Dead Until Dark, and this is the story of Suki. Suki is a waitress in a diner in USA when her path meets a very ancient vampire, and Suki has telepathic powers and means that she can hear people's thoughts, and then when this vampire comes into the diner and she cannot hear what he's thinking, it was like a saving grace for her, basically, just kind of having that respite. So she befriends him, and then, you know, things happened. There is also the series True Blood, which I absolutely loved. It's a very, I mean, the books have sexual content, but they are definitely not to the level of Laura K. Hamilton. So they are adults, but I guess new adult books, I'd probably describe them. And the covers for these, the American cover for these, when I bought them, they were just coming out, and I was a teen, I guess, when I read these, late teenagehood, and I love the series. It's just, again, one that I couldn't put down, and it's definitely one that came up to my mind when I thought about fall. And by Charlaine Harris, though, another series that it's definitely not popular. I've never heard anybody ever speaking about these. It's a quartet, I believe, by Charlaine Harris, and the first book is called Graveside. And again, I put here the cover. I think they came out in USA. Back then I was in USA, so I was going to Barnes and Nobles, and I saw the covers of these, and they remind me of covers of Cozy Mysteries, basically. And I definitely say that this is a paranormal series, and it's about these siblings. They are actually not actually biological siblings, or they're like step siblings, something of the sort. And they go around the country solving mysteries, because I believe the girl has some powers that have to do with dead bodies. So I don't remember if she can find them, or she kind of feels when a dead body is around or something of the sort. And I loved these. I think there was an element of romance in these that, I don't know, it just worked for me as well, but it's not the main plot of the books. It's definitely like a cozy mystery with a paranormal element to it. Love the covers. If you can get your hands on these covers, I mean, just amazing. It's definitely an less popular series by Charlaine Harris, but I think that, I mean, they're not, you know, books that are gonna blow your mind or not the best thing ever, but they're definitely in the theme of fall. Instead, urban fantasy that I definitely recommend is Something from the Night Side. I'd describe it like as the unpopular brother of the Dresden Files. I read one book in the Dresden Files. It was okay, I'll continue on, but Something from the Night Side, I absolutely loved. I've read these ages ago, so I apologize because it's going to be a very vague synopsis. But it's basically about this detective that has to solve crimes that have to deal with paranormal creatures, but he lives in this city where basically at nighttime there is like another city coming out, or you can move from one city to the other, and it's a very peculiar premise. Got definitely a detective element to the story added to the creatures, and I just remember that it was a very entertaining, quick, with like very funny banter between characters. So I'm definitely gonna continue with this. Love the series. The first 3 books I've read, at least. A book that I do own, and it's actually up there, but I've got my photos. It's a plant, if you don't know, but I've got a huge plant, and it's keeping it in place, one branch of a plant, so I'm not gonna move it. But it's Every Heart Doorway. It's a very, again, popular fantasy series. This screams fall vibes to me, definitely. And they're very short books, and every book is about a different child that's gone to a fantasy world and has come back and didn't manage to fit back in society, modern society. So they're whisked off to this school that's supposed to help them reintegrate, or at least give them other friends and a community where they can share their turmoils and their disappointment and try to move forward after being kicked out of the fantasy world that they went through. And the first book is very murder mystery. The others are definitely different, but I absolutely loved all of them, the majority of them. Even the one that I liked the least was still a very solid, probably 4 stars. Fascinating, weird story that I'm in for. This book I'm gonna recommend it just because I think that there is no other time of the year to read these apart from when it's raining outside. I mean, since this is defined and talked about as, you know, misery porn basically, or like you know, this is a book you read if you want to hurt yourself, if you want to cry, if you want to feel like shit, if you want to be miserable. And to be fair, I understand that people sometimes, me included, we feel like, yes, I'm gonna open this book, hurt me, let me cry. I don't know why we do this to ourselves, but we do. So, A Little Life. I mean, I was upset about this book. Like, I appreciated what she did, but also I was upset. And I'm just gonna leave it like that, because you've heard about this book a million times. This is the story of these four friends, and you follow them throughout their kind of miserable lives. And you're gonna get into these knowing that this is very sad, and you're gonna get to the end and probably curse me or everybody else who has recommended this to you. But there is also an element that sticks with you. And I guess at the end of the day, what the author does, it's something different, because it's hard to read a book that's just so, makes you so feel so miserable. But also, and that's something very important that I want to put out there, is that unfortunately lives like this happen. Like, it's not something that happens only in books. So I did respect the hell out of this book. I was honestly upset, and I guess the author did what she was supposed to do. She decided to write something that was gonna break me, and she did. So, Omens by Kelly Armstrong. She is famous for actually writing a series, I think, about werewolves, something. Definitely fantasy books she was writing, and then she wrote these, which is more of a crime, thrillerish vibe going on. I just read the first one. I think it's a trilogy, but I really enjoyed the first one. And basically, you've got this girl. She's been adopted, but she finds out that she's actually the daughter of two very famous serial killers. And at one point, she is in danger in her old life. She has to flee, and she goes to this very small town that has some affiliation with her parents, and she wants to find out who her parents were and what they did, and all of that. So I really enjoyed the first book. White Hot Kiss by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I would also say that if you are into romance, YA romance, also relax series, it's a very good one, and it's definitely good for autumn. Like, I remember I actually read these in fall, and I binged read these. Although I guess this series, I mean, this is one series that there is a love triangle in it, and it's basically this girl, and then you got a demon and a gargoyle. And I think Jennifer L. Armentrout, she just does YA romances very well. I enjoy them all. They are tropey, they are problematic in certain aspects, but they're just so bloody entertaining. And this is just a trilogy. I mean, I didn't like the ending of a love triangle, but overall as a series was highly entertaining. Loved the romance despite the end, and just it's worth it if you like YA romance, though. If you don't, just stay away. Next one, I just got the unfortunately second book, but the first book is called The Alienist. This is just a duology so far that I know of. There is also a TV show on Netflix that's amazing for both books. Both books have been adapted, and The Alienist is about these psychologists in the 17th century, 18th century, I believe, and he has a serial killer on his hands, and the police and a bunch of other characters that you're gonna fall in love with, they have to help the alienist, when the psychologist was called alienist, as to figure out what the killer is doing, why is he doing, in order to capture him. Amazing. The TV show, if you don't want to read the book, The Alienist on Netflix, don't miss it out. If you like gothic, mystery, horror-ish, serial killer stuff vibe with a mystery, and it's pretty scary and graphic to a certain degree, you cannot miss this out. American Psycho. I've got this is not English. I got this because of the cover. I read this as part of reading the 10 most disturbing books ever written challenge I've done a couple of years ago, probably more by now. I'll link it down below. It's a very old video. I apologize for the quality and everything, but I had a great time doing that challenge. And this is a book that I actually gave it just 3 stars, but when I was closing my eyes, it's probably the second book that came to mind. Definitely a fucked up book. Definitely disturbing, although it wasn't the most disturbing. The movie is very famous as well, and it's a whole thing, this book. You can love it or not. I didn't love it. It's probably an exception in this list because it's a book that I didn't particularly love, but again, what it does, it's unique, and it's just weird. It's just a weird, fucked up book. And you got your main protagonist, who's a very white collar guy, but he is a psycho and he likes killing brutally women, or does he? And also, can we like appreciate my Funko Pop for this, because I loved it. I don't know if it was like an edition with blood spatter on him and I couldn't get my hands on it, but like they go together. Speaking about vampires, the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires by Adrian Hendricks, very famous book, has been around all over the place, especially during Halloween recommendations, so I'm not gonna go into much about this. It's about this woman living in a very fancy town in USA. She has a book club, she's middle-aged, and she is somehow not very happy with her life, and then a very shady man comes into town, and this man might not be 100% human, he might be up to no good. And the ladies in the book club are the only ones between the bad guy and justice. And it's Adrian Hendricks. It's just funny. I didn't give this 5 stars, it was probably 4 stars, but it's a book that definitely stuck with me. It's definitely another kind of, not your typical vampire, not your typical story about vampires, and not your typical heroes in it. Worth it, definitely worth it. Perfect October fall vibe. And I couldn't not mention The Shadowy Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. If you follow me, you know that this is my ultimate favorite book ever, probably. I love this to pieces. I love his writing. Again, a very popular book that you might have heard before, but this is the story of a boy who has to solve a mystery about an author that wrote a book and then disappeared into nothingness. It's amazingly written and it's a very, very fall vibe. Like from the cover, the atmosphere, the amazing writing, the mystery element, just this book is perfection, and there is no better way to read this if not in a fall. Again, rain outside, on the sofa with hot chocolate, like you're not gonna regret this. Night Film by Marisha Pesto. This is a very divisive book. I feel like some people love it, some people don't. This book has written in like it's a weird format. You got different kind of media in it, and I really enjoyed this book. I really loved this book, and it's about these investigative journalists trying to put together the story of this daughter of a famous movie director that committed suicide. And did she really? Why did she, if she actually did? And it's madness. Like at one point toward the end of the book, you get in pages of our protagonists going through one of the most weird and suffocating experiences I ever read in a book. Amazing, loved it. Definitely more on the thriller, dark thriller vibe. Although it's not truly violent itself, the atmosphere the author can create, and that second part of the book is just, I couldn't put this book down. And I've always divisive, say that's definitely one that you need to read, because it's a book that's worth having an opinion on. You might love it, you might hate it, but it's still worth your time. For gothic vibes, I cannot not recommend Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I love this book so much, like it's one of the very few books that I've owned 2 copies of. It's probably like only 2 books I own 2 copies of, and I'll probably own more. Is the gothic novel in its essence. It's a classic. It's the story of this woman who remarries this man after he lost his wife, and she moves to his mansion in the countryside in England. But when she gets to the house, she realizes that a lot of the people that live in there are still holding on to the remembrance of Rebecca, the first wife, and something is just wrong. And you figure out with our protagonist, who's never named, what actually happened to Rebecca. And it's amazing. It's Rebecca. If you are in for a very fascinating, disturbing, non-fiction, true crime, Paul Britton picking up the pieces, and actually this is the second. The first one is The Jigsaw Man. I put a cover here. So it's a duology written by a forensic psychologist who actually consulted with the police on very famous serial killer cases in England. And as someone who studied forensic psychology, this was my Bible at the beginning. When I started studying this, it was one of the reasons why I decided to go down this route. I love the guy. He's so talented but humble at the same time. love the guy, is an inspiration. But again, content warning in the sense that, you know, it does describe crimes and actual, you know, things that these serial killers did, so be aware. Second to last, The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I gave this book 4 stars. I didn't end up like loving it. It's not the best thriller I've ever read, the thriller that I've recommended before. I loved it more, definitely. But this is a nice standalone, very quick read that keeps you on the edge of your seat. And it's based on The Turn of a Screw. I actually read these in preparation for watching The Haunting of Bly Manor on Netflix. Loved that TV show. It was probably one of the best TV shows I've watched last year. Loved it so bloody much. And when I come back though to that TV show and I think about this book that is, you know, I read in preparation for that, which has nothing to do with that. You can read this and watch that and you're just like, it's nothing to do with each other. But I keep thinking about this, and I had a great time reading these. And at the end of the day, I might not have loved everything about these, but it was a page turner that keeps the tension going. It's just a very fast-paced, interesting, at the end of the day, read. And finally, Sadie by Kirsten Summers. This is one of my favorite YA ever. From the cover to the format to everything in these, like Sadie must be probably the best young protagonist I've read. It's definitely my vibe. Sadie is the story of this girl that lost her sister because someone actually killed her sister, and you followed a dual perspective. You got Sadie perspective, and then you follow a host of a very popular podcast, a mystery podcast, and his POV takes place months after the POV of Sadie, and it all makes sense when you read this. It's a fairly short book, so the fact that it packed such a punch in such a short book, it's, I mean, Kirsten Summers like got me as a fan after reading these so quickly. I was down for. I loved this all. I love the ending. Like I don't want to spoil it. So there was a lot of emotions at the ending, and there was a lot of frustration, but also like awe. Like I was in awe for this book, and it's probably to these days it reminds me why I'm still reading YA, because yes, I'm sick of some tropes or a lot of genres that I don't reach out for anymore. But there are such gems out there that are still worth trying, because when you find them, they're gonna stick with you forever. And that was it. Let me know your recommendations down below, because I'm definitely open up for new recommendations. I always look for other books. I hope you will get even one book out of this recommendation video, hopefully. Even if you get one, it's still something, isn't it? Have a lovely day. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time, guys. Ciao!